video in the film Collateral Murder was incredibly impactful to me, as you know, many of you may even remember it. The moment it came out, I think there's something about that document of war which goes beyond just the common images of violence we see. And so I remember it being on the television and just being very impacted by it. And then when
Excuse me, what was the name of the documentary?
No, it was Collateral Murder, which is the film, the Apache film. But it wasn't until a few years later, when she was already in prison, that I actually started to talk to her. And I was working on a series of projects. I have a background in filmmaking and also activism. I was working on a series of projects about whistleblowers and activists who are either political prisoners or in hiding. And it was called Unfilmables because the characters were literally unfilmable. We couldn't get access with cameras. So we were looking at other ways of telling these stories as documentaries. Well, I wrote her a letter in prison. And I wrote her a letter because I heard that she'd been thrown into solitary confinement. And it was actually because she had a book which wasn't sanctioned by the prison, and it was a book written by a friend of mine. And so I wrote to her just in solidarity. I didn't really expect a reply, to be honest, but a few months later I got a letter in the post from the prison in Kansas.
And what was in the letter?
It just said, I heard because of the book of a friend of mine that you've been thrown into solitary confinement, and I was outraged, and I wanted to send my love and solidarity and say, you know, there's people outside of prison who massively who care about you and are so grateful for what you've done.
Sorry, it was her saying about what she heard about herself in the media, or was it just you gave the information about what was what kind of information in the media were about her?
I don't quite understand.
What actually, because in the letter she said about what she heard from you about herself, or was it,
Sorry, I got confused. That was my letter to her, and she wrote back saying, thank you, and she was curious about the project I was working on, and she wanted to know if she could be involved. And so from then, we started collaborating on the idea of a film. But this film was going to be a film which didn't have Chelsea in it. It was a film with an invisible protagonist. And that was actually the concept of the film initially. It was actually the reason why I wanted to make it was to give her a voice, despite the fact that the prison wouldn't allow us to have even a picture of her from inside.
Jaka jest teraz sytuacja prawna jej? Czy ona w dalszym ciągu siedzi w areszcie, czy wyszła?
So what her legal situation now? Is she released now, or what?
No, she's still in prison, and it seems likely that she will be in prison until I believe next October, which would be the full 18 months. It's a complicated situation, so it's probably worth me unpacking a little bit. But yeah, do you want to translate that bit first? In America, you have the Fifth Amendment, which means that you have the right against self-incrimination. So normally you don't have to testify in a trial.
No, ona tak naprawdę nie ma takiego obowiązku, żeby zeznawać się w swojej sprawie, w związku z tym no, jest to bardzo zagmatwana sprawa.
So the government played a clever move. If you see this as a game of chess, they said, well, you can have immunity. So none of the crimes that you've committed here can come back to implicate you again. But if she gets anything, if she says anything that's the slightest bit different from the original trial, she can be put on trial for perjury. So there's a clever move, perjury, from the government. They say you have immunity, but not immunity from perjury. It's a very complicated issue, but basically, out of principle and out of not trusting this very secretive grand jury. You don't have a lawyer, by the way, in a grand jury. You go into a room, it's secret, the press are not allowed in, you don't have a lawyer with you. So it's a very easy situation in which you could perjure yourself. And on top of that, she's being fined $1,000 every day for the right to be in prison.
How come?
It's a very unusual situation. I don't believe it's ever been used before in this way against an individual. But yeah, they're saying every day that you don't attend the court for what we want, you have to pay $1,000, even though she's in prison. So now she owes $180,000 to the U.S. government.
100, how much exactly?
Currently, it's 180,000.
So first, thank you for your great movie again. And then you said that you focus on political films, yeah. And then I would like to ask, do you plan to shoot for another political film in outside America? Like I know some, I just for example, some chaos in Hong Kong right now, and I think there are many activists, because they would like to raise for their freedom out there. And do you plan to just shoot another movie outside America?
Well, specifically on Hong Kong, well, the nice thing about being in my position now is I have a really amazing set of collaborators and producers who I know, and connections with, you know, funding bodies and channels. So, for example, me and a producer that I work with on this is making a film with activists in Hong Kong. And I'm sure it's not the only one, but it's, you know, that's very exciting. And yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not just focused on America, but it sort of happens that my next project will be in America. But I also would love to return to Latin America, which is a place that I lived for many years. South America at some time. I think there's a wealth of stories out there, and often maybe it's not me who needs to make it, but if I can help other people, you know, make their films as well, that's just a fantastic thing to do.